Hey everyone, it's Kelly from Silly Moon Quilting Co. Today we're going to talk about Dawn dish detergent, Sharpies, and rulers. Stay tuned to see what I have to say about all of those things and how they work together for you to help your quilting journey. So we're going to talk about today the different line markings on rulers, and you'll see that we've got an assortment of different rulers here, and that's because they all kind of line up differently, and we need to know what we're looking at when we look at rulers. Now, the trick with rulers, when you're looking to purchase rulers, ours or anybody else's, it's important to look at the line markings to make sure they make sense to you. Doesn't matter if they make sense to me or to any other designer, they need to make sense to you. So with our rulers, there's a couple basics with all the rulers, and then there's a couple things that I want to talk about that are individual to different rulers. So we're going to talk about all of that today. So we're going to start with our Edgy 6 ruler. Edgy 6 is our basic straight edge. Everyone should have one in their toolbox ruler. Yes, it also comes in a 10-inch, so you can get 6-inch or 10-inch depending on which you prefer. You'll notice that we've got center line markings, we've got 30, 45, and 60 degree markings, and then we also have horizontal and vertical markings across the ruler. And what I'm not going to get too much into the ruler itself. I want to just go over the line markings and how to read them and what you're kind of looking for when you're purchasing rulers. So if you look at Edgy 6 here, I'm just going to move some of these out of the way. The first thing we need to know when we're working with our rulers is we want to make sure that that ruler is going to do what we want it to do. So with this ruler, we've got straight lines, and we can create some fun angles. So we want to make sure that the ruler is going to do the things we want it to do. And are the markings going to make sense to us that we can make it do what we want it to do? To start, I've just got some plain lines drawn here on this quilt sandwich, and I'm going to move my ruler over, or my ruler foot over here. Now, it's important to look at the ruler foot because this is going to make a big difference when you're looking at the rulers. So my ruler foot is 1/2 inch in diameter, which means from the outside here to the outside here, my ruler foot is 1/2 inch. And what that means is my needle here, where I put the thread through so it's easier to see, is 1/4 inch away from the edge of my ruler foot all the way around. So our needle should be in the center, and that ruler foot is round, so 1/4 inch any side we go on our ruler foot, okay? So if I bring my needle down in this position here, and bring my needle down there, we can see that my ruler foot is now in sewing position. And if I bring my ruler foot up to the edge, or my ruler up to the edge of my ruler foot, we can see that I am now 1/4 inch away from the needle. So the needle to the edge of my ruler is 1/4 inch away. So what we want to look for then is, are we maintaining the same distance as we come along here? So if I have reference lines going across here, I can use these marking lines to know that I'm straight. If I'm putting my ruler on top of an existing line, I know I'm straight. But if I'm putting my ruler against the ruler foot and I'm kind of out in space, I don't necessarily know if I'm straight. So that's why we came up with this little guy. His name's Dude, and if you followed me for a while, you know all about Dude. Comes in a whole bunch of different colors. And he's made of aluminum. You can hear that. And the reason he is made out of aluminum is that when you drop him, then you can hear him hit the floor. And it also means that you're not going to roll over it with your chair and break the arm if you had a small acrylic one or a other thin metal one. These are actually 1/8 thickness. So one of the main things about Dude is this little 1/4 inch arm. And if I put that 1/4 inch arm on my seam or my line that I've got marked, I can now move my ruler up to that point to the other edge of the arm. So this side to this side is a true 1/4 inch. And now I know that if I stitch straight down here, I'm going to stay on that chalk line. And I know that I'm going to be nice and straight. So that little 1/4 inch arm on dude is going to tell me where my needle is going to end up when I butt it up against my ruler. Okay, so we're going to put him to the side for now. The other thing we want to talk about with the ruler is you'll see we've got other line markings on here. Sorry for the light. Other line markings on here. So if I go to the edge of my ruler, we see that gap. If I move my ruler over so that my straight line is, or my edge of my ruler is on my line, I am now going to stitch a 1/4 inch over, even though my ruler is on top of the line that I've drawn. If I move one other line over, all of the lines on the ruler are a 1/4 inch away from each other. So from the edge of the ruler, this way, from the edge of the ruler to this first engraved line is a 1/4 inch. From this engraved line to this engraved line is a 1/4 inch. And then the same at this end. Each of them are a 1/4 inch away from the other line, okay? So just remember that when you're looking at one of our rulers, if you look at the edge and you come in a line and it's a reference line, it's going to be a 1/4 inch away, okay? This is a general rule. There are a couple exceptions with the design of our rulers, and as you use different rulers, you'll start to see why they are the way they are. So, but for the edgy 6, edgy 10, the first engraved line is a 1/4 inch away from the edge of the ruler, and that's on both ends, and it's symmetrical. And then of course we've got our 30, 45, and 60-degree markings if you want to line that ruler up and create some specific angles. I'm going to show you our one part of our snowman set. So we've got 3, 4, 5-inch circles. So this snowman set, same thing. This first engraved line on the bottom is a 1/4 inch away from the edge of this ruler. So if I line this up, I have my center lines here and here. If I line the center engraved line on my line there, my chalk marked line, I can go and stitch all the way around there and I will end up with a perfect 4-inch circle. As we move the line down, we've shifted where the circle's going to be and where the center point of that circle is. So if I want to do clamshells, I can use that center line for a perfect half circle, but as I move it down, it's going to change the depth of this arc. You'll notice on this ruler and some of our rulers, we've got markings on half of the ruler. That's a design choice so that it leaves this area clear. If we have line markings all the way along here, sometimes it gets a little confusing what line we're referencing. So we want to make sure that we're using, we want to make sure we're looking at rulers and again, understanding the lines that we're looking at. We don't want to put so many lines on a ruler that it makes it difficult to see what we're trying to stitch, or we see the lines that we've got marked on our quilt underneath. So we really want to take a quick look at the ruler. Do the lines make sense to me? Can I still clearly see my fabric underneath those lines? Then we look at a ruler similar to the circle, except it's a half circle. And you'll see there's numbers on here. This is one of a set, and you can buy them individually or a set. But this is Beanie 6-2. So the 6/2 means that if I put this engraved line, so the one that goes through the holes on my line that's marked here, I now can do half of a 2-inch circle, and I can rotate my ruler, and I will line up the same line, so the one that goes through the hole, to create another half. So I've got now a full 2-inch circle, but you can see I'm only holding a smaller piece of acrylic. So this becomes quite handy when you're working on a domestic machine, or if your hands are a little bit smaller, you're holding on to something smaller, where if you were going to do a full 6-inch circle, you would have to use a much larger piece of solid acrylic. So we've got line markings on half. And this is an example of where I said, here we've got our first line marking is a 1/4 inch away from the edge. Here it's further than that. And the reason for that is we wanted to make it clear that the bottom line of the lines that are engraved on here, the bottom line is our main reference line. So we made sure the hole went through there so we could use that as a main reference line and know that that's where we're going to create our center circle. or is going to line up there so we can create our circle. And then if I use the same marking line and I go on the outside, I am now going to create a 6-inch circle. So when you look at Beanie, you'll see those two line numbers on there. The first number is the outside size circle you'll create, and the smaller number is the inside. So each one will create 2 different circles. So we've got our line markings on there. You'll also notice that we've got angular line markings. So if I wanted to do a Baptist fan or an arc in the corner of a block, I can use these angular line markings and come down here and to stitch an angular line. You'll notice again, we've left some open space, and the reason for that is for you to be able to see and orient where you are. If I created lines all the way across here, it just makes it a little more difficult to know what lines we're using when we actually get into the quilting. We're now going to look at a ruler like our twinkle ruler. So it's our star ruler, again available in 3 different sizes, A, B, and C. So this one's a little different. The line that you see on the bottom here is actually the line where your ruler foot, if you nest your ruler foot in this little indentation here, that line is where your needle is. So it gives you a reference point as to where your needle is. So if you want to line it up on your seam here, I keep calling it a seam, it's a stitch line. If you want to line up on there, you can go ahead and look at that line and know that your star is going to start there and your needle is going to be in alignment with that line. The other thing you want to note with their twinkle set is the star that you see engraved on there is the star that will stitch out. So it is easy then when you take the twinkle rulers to put it over top of, say for example, I had a little cat here and I wanted this star to be around the cat, I can use the star that is engraved on the ruler as my marking line or knowing where I'm going to have to put my ruler to make sure that that's where the star is going to be. And there's lots of other videos on the channel that show you how to stitch these out, so I'm not going to do that. That's not this video. It is strictly just to talk about ruler line markings and get you to look at rulers to make sure they're going to do what you want them to do. Okay, so that's the thing about the twinkle. That's why that one's a little bit different. So this is wedgie. This is our wedgie ruler. Our drop ruler is very similar, but you'll notice that we've got line markings up here, and we've got line markings here, and we've got a line marking here. So on wedgie, the center line here is going to tell me where my needle is going to end up, because of course I'm a 1/4 inch away from the edge of that ruler. These other lines are just for you to be able to line up your wedge in different places on your quilt. Okay, so once we've stitched our first wedge, we then, if we want to pivot about the center point and determine whether we want to have 6, so this is 60 degrees times 6. So if I rotate my ruler and put this engraved line on top of the line I just stitched, I am going to end up about the center point with 6 identical wedges. If I go the other way, this one says 45 degrees times 8, it is going to give me 8 of the exact same wedge. So again, the engraved line that you see here is a duplicate of the stitched line that you make with your thread on your quilt. Okay, and we've got a line marking here that shows that that's the center point of this wedge. So if I was on a straight line here and I wanted to only do a partial wedge, I know that I can use that line to line up along my seam. So I want to give you one more little trick. So every ruler that we make has lots of different line markings, and it's always a bit of a discussion as to how many are enough and how many are too many. So sometimes when we get a ruler, we decide that we want to have a different line marking. So say for example, on our wedgie ruler, I decided that I want to come down a little bit further than the center point, but I don't want to go all the way to this bottom point. We have a couple options for this. And if you've taken a class from me, you've heard my cautionary tales about using a Sharpie, and I will give you a cautionary tale about using a Sharpie anywhere near your quilt. You have to be 100% careful making sure that the Sharpie doesn't fall on your quilt, or that the Sharpie doesn't end up on the other side. Your ruler's turned upside down with the Sharpie on your quilt. Even if it's dry, you're best not to do it. But if you're working on a quilt top and you know that you're only going to do that top, and then you're willing to do step 2 of this process, this can actually help you as well. So I'm going to take my Sharpie, and I'm going to do it over here so you can see a little better. And I'm just going to guess at a line marking. We're going to assume that this line is the same across here. It's not completely straight. So there's my new line marking. I'm going to give it a minute to dry. I'm going to put the lid on my Sharpie so it doesn't end up on anything else. I'm going to bring that back, and I can now use that reference line on top of my quilt. So I can stitch up here and over and back down, and use that new reference line as that's where I want my needle to end, or that's where I'm going to put my seam. So if we look at where I've drawn the line here, that's maybe where I want to have a seam that goes across, and I want to come up and over and down, and I want the wedge to be a little wider here, maybe not all the way to the bottom. Maybe I'm ending my wedge inside with a circle. I've got a circle here, so that's where I want my wedge to end. I might put my own marking on that ruler. Now what you need to do, if you're going to do this, if you're going to put a black mark on your ruler, before you finish anything else, before you take your quilt off your frame, or if you're using your domestic machine, as soon as you are done with this ruler, you want to get rid of that Sharpie and get rid of it for good, so that there's no chance it's going to end up on something else. So I have discovered that Dawn Platinum Power Wash is great for this. So I'm just going to put this under here. I would normally do this over the sink, but I'm going to show you here just because I want to show you what it looks like. So I'm going to have this on my graph paper here. I'm just going to put a little tiny squirt on each of those 2 marks and move it over. And I'm just going to let that sit there for a minute. And then I'm going to take a piece of batting, scraps of batting. We all have scraps of batting around. You can use a cloth or whatever you want to do. It'll work. And then I'm just simply going to give that a little rub on both sides. And I want to make sure I get all the soap off. And you can see the Sharpie is gone. So then what I'll do as an extra caution, I will take this ruler and wash it just under some warm water, just to make sure I don't have any soap residue or anything on it. And that's going to make sure that those black marks that I had put on here are gone, and I don't need to worry about them ending up anywhere else on another quilt, okay? So if they don't come off at first, give it another squirt. I would typically leave it on a little bit longer than that, but that will take care of those black marks and get rid of that Sharpie for good. Again, take it and give it another wash. Wash it under the tap with some hot soapy water and dish soap, okay? So another way that we can do the same thing without actually using any Sharpie at all is we can use washi tape or any other kind of tape. I happen to have the diagonal seam tape, and I don't use tons of it, so I've got a good roll. So I can rip off some of that, and I can use that to create my marking where I want to put my line. And if I take that diagonal seam tape and I put it straight across, and if I use that bottom reference line here as my reference to make sure that I'm straight, I can go like that and put it right straight across. And then you can either take a little knife and go through here, or you can take your scissors and do a nice little clip there. So once I've got that all lined up there, I can turn this over and just do a little snip along the edge on either side. Pull that center out, fold that over a little bit. You want to keep minimal amount on the inside because you don't want it to interfere with anything. And now I have a nice even straight line in addition to some other line markings on my ruler. Okay, so there's just a couple other ways to add additional marking lines to your rulers if you feel that what you need for distance or spacing isn't quite accurate. Okay, so I hope that you enjoy that video. I hope it gives you some thought on what you're looking for when you're looking at rulers and what the rulers are going to do for you. If you have any questions, please put them in the comments below. I'm happy to answer any questions you have, and I hope you have an amazing quilty day.